I've managed to get PowerPoint presentation up within about 30 seconds. That's the first miracle of this conference. As Scott says, I'm David McBeth. I'm the chair now of AURIL for this year, and I'm keen to try to set a little bit of the tone for the conference as well. I think Philip has done very well in terms of setting the external context. But I think it's important for me to try to convey, I think, the way that I would like the conference to go, all things being equal. As Philip has pointed out, you know, we are facing as a sector, and that includes the universities and the public sector research establishments, we are facing a challenge. It's a very different environment, even from perhaps the environment of 1 year ago. The global economy is a completely different beast from what it was perhaps 3, 4, 5 years ago. The balance of power within the global economy is quite different, and you know, being completely brutal about it, a lot of Western countries, particularly in the Eurozone, are not really awash with cash at the moment, either in a government context or in an industry context. We've also got to look at our public sector funding environment here, and I think that last year's conference, for those of you that were at it in Newcastle, my own feeling was that there was a little bit of a cloud over things because the comprehensive spending review results had not been announced at that point in time. The public sector delegates who were here were not really in a position to say very much about their plans, and I think quite a lot of us from within the AURIL community were at that point feeling a degree of kind of inflicted restructuring within our own institutions. That wasn't a particularly happy climate, and I think it kind of showed through in terms of last year's conference. But we know where we are now, or we have a much better idea where we are now, and it's a mixed bag. You know, 30 universities in England are no longer in receipt of any appreciable amount of HIFE funding. That's a big deal for the institutions affected in that way. On the upside, the Technology Strategy Board has introduced the Technology and Innovation Centres. That's a new piece of the landscape for a lot of our institutions that we have to adapt to and engage with, and I think that there are opportunities for conference to have that debate. And then here within the devolved administration in Scotland, we have an announcement that the Scottish Government would like to see a single knowledge exchange office. That's a really big policy change in the Scottish context, but I don't think we know for sure what it's going to mean as it pans out. So it's a different environment, but there are much clearer signposts now than there were last year as to how that environment is going to look. My own view is that such a change leads to opportunity. The statement about the status quo, you know, I felt, is that the right thing to say? Because I don't think any of us want to hang on to the status quo. I don't think that's the mindset of the AURIL membership. I think the mindset is towards development and improvement. And so I use those words with caution, but I think what I mean there is that the environment that we have now creates opportunities, opportunities to do things differently, opportunities to do things more collaboratively. But also, of course, the cost pressures are real, and my own view is that Wellings perhaps came up with some suggestions at the wrong time, but reality of the situation is that perhaps we need to revisit Wellings in some contexts, and in particular we need to look perhaps with more vision and imagination and less threat in mind at the possibilities for collaboration and joint working on a regional basis where that makes sense. So my own personal view is that collaboration has a big role to play. Now my contention is that the AURIL members are in a privileged position in many respects. I thought about saying our privileged position, but I wasn't 100% confident about the spelling, so I went for our special position. But I think the universities and the public sector research establishments and their knowledge transfer and knowledge exchange offices do have a privileged position. We see a bigger slice of the innovation landscape than a lot of the other actors in the landscape. We see a bigger slice than industry. We see a bigger slice than the policymakers. So we have got a privilege in some respects. And if we recognise the bits that work well, let's try to adopt those practices more widely. There's no harm in taking a good idea if it works and porting it into your own circumstances. Likewise, if from our view of the situation we recognise the real barriers, let's react to improve those issues that we're recognising as barriers, rather than have those barriers pointed out to us by others. If we know that barriers are there, let us address them. And let's use this privileged position and vision that we have here as a selling point in our bid to influence. Let's not moan amongst ourselves that, if only they could see it from our perspective. Let's get out there and tell them how it is from our perspective and make positive suggestions in terms of policy influence. Phil used the word engage. It's critical. Conference provides a fantastic opportunity for people to engage both with the speakers who are here and also with each other. You don't need me to go over that. As Philip said, we listen to the members, and I think you'll find that the programme this year has a lot more of an external face about it than perhaps the programme last year did. I think the programme last year was preoccupied with our public sector stakeholders. Our public sector stakeholders are here in force today, and they're very welcome and a very important part of the equation. But we're also going to have much more in the way of externals, much more in the way of private sector contribution in the conference this year. That's a direct response to both the members' concerns and also to the environment that we're in. We can't be in a position where we always turn to the public sector for a future. And finally, again, another fairly cliched word, innovate. But we do have track record in the sector. We do have track record of doing innovative things that work. And I'm not going to pick out special examples because I always find that that's a little bit divisive. Almost every institution here or every organisation represented here will have one example at least of really good practice in the knowledge exchange area. Let's not forget about that and let's not get downtrodden about things. We've also got fantastic skill sets amongst the membership, not just in the people in this room, but in the people in all of your organisations. These are skill sets for managing interfaces, they're skill sets for business development, client management. These have applicability in broader context than simply the old-fashioned sort of tech transfer. We also have great networks and contacts, and again, this is an example of us as a kind of nexus where we have public sector, private sector, other institutions all round about us. Those contacts and networks need to be worked. Closing off with a couple of personal opinions about where opportunity may lie. I certainly think personally that the student dimension of knowledge transfer and knowledge exchange is something that over the next few years we will need to look at more closely as AURIL. Fantastic resource there. Governments want to see universities have an economic impact, and there's the skills agenda as one thing, but there is the student body as a resource for knowledge transfer and knowledge exchange, which I think is something that we've only scratched the surface of. And the second thing to say, and it goes without saying, is the international dimension. Not just because the balance of money within global markets has shifted considerably, but it's a conceit, I think, on Britain's part to believe that we have it all. That our institutional base together with our industry base is enough for us to make the progress that we need to make economically. In a lot of regions in the UK, we don't have business R&D, or we don't have businesses that have the dreaded absorptive capacity for what universities are offering. If we want to create economic impact in different ways, we're going to have to look out, as well as concentrating on our own doorstep, we're going to have to look externally. I think it's almost self-evident. And on that note of international, I think it's probably time for me to shut up and give you the opportunity to hear from Dr. Naqvi, who's the Executive Director of the Higher Education Commission in Pakistan, who's already been speaking to me about the importance of international collaboration for our types of organisations. So, I'm hoping